am a temple who walks the earth. My womb is fertile for giving birth. I am a woman planted in truth. I grow my branches from sacred roots. You are the form of who you want to be. So come untethered, your soul is free. We're here to heal, we're here to thrive. We are a dream who's come alive. We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An evolution for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. 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 For God's sake.
Hello, Essence. This is Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. And today I am delighted to bring to you two very special soul sisters of mine and pleasure guides in this human walk that we're doing. And if you've been with us through the Woman Come Undone Experience, you will recognize both of them were women who showed up in the holy hot seat for that experience and shared themselves so beautifully with us. And when they approached me recently and told me what they were up to with this new offering that they have around pleasure, I was like, I am in. Not only am I in as far as sharing it, but I'm in as a participant, because these two women are really two of the most embodied, essence-filled, pleasure-filled women that I've ever come in contact with. Every time I'm in their presence, whether it be, just in a conversation over the phone or actually in person, I'm really in awe. Like, I can't even stop watching how they move and how they think and how they really just embrace the most simple things are pleasure, And I think sometimes when we hear about pleasure, we imagine that it means, orgasm or sex or something along those lines. But these women take this to a completely new evolutionary level where, they're so about each moment, each breath, the taste on the tongue, the way that they feel within their own body and their own experience, like really essence, embodied essence, and taking that to the fullest expression, including, the experience of pleasure, of being in essence as pleasure. So I can't wait to hear from them and share with you all that they are up to, and I'm sure that it will be vast and expansive. And I guess I want to say just a little bit about them aside from essence, just so you have a framework for who they are. But one of the things that's super cool about them is they really do approach this life so similarly to me. Like, they don't really go by a lot of labels, and they've done amazing things in the world, and their gig is really a lot more about who they are versus what they do. So that's why I love playing with them, because you never know what's going to happen, and you never know what they're going to say. And just to give you some frame of reference, Amber is Amber Hartnell. And she's a dancer, she's an evolutionary midwife, she, just embodies wisdom and transmits it from her very presence. So she does some stuff in the world. She does coaching, and she, has been part of the ecstatic birthing movement, and, it's all about pleasure, and, does some coaching and things like that. And mostly she's a stellar example of what embodied essence is. And Ariel is Ariel White, and she is an artist, an entrepreneur, an activist. She's a model. She's she's really, I think, on the edge of social entrepreneurialism and a powerful voice in the fields of sexuality, creativity, intimacy. She's a poet, a dancer, a performance artist. She is married to Jess Johnson, who sings the opening Untamed anthem. And we heard Jess talk about her wife, and so we get to experience the other half of that now, too. So anyway, cannot wait to share these two gorgeous souls with you. So without further ado, welcome Amber and Ariel. Hello, ladies.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Jody. We're so happy to be here. Yes, thank you for inviting us to come and play with you today.
So fun. And for those of you listening to the show at the normal time slot, we actually pre-recorded it because Ariel and Amber are together in Hawaii, and so the time zone difference had us have to record this in advance. And so so glad to be here with you and to hear what you're creating together. And I'm experiencing the pleasure waves from, all the way across the ocean.
Oh, yes, the currents run especially deep in Kauai. It's true. It's so luscious and moist and flowing with feminine essence. And it's this amazing combination of totally wild and fully safe because there's no poisonous bugs or predator animals that could bite you or anything like that. So you can go out into luscious, wild jungle, naked if you want to, and fully surrendered in your pleasure, knowing that you're safe. So it's a really interesting combination.
Gorgeous. And Amber, you live in Hawaii, right?
This is my home base, my taproot. Although I move a lot around this planet, this is the place that I always come home to.
I love that. I've actually never been, although my spirit keeps calling me there, and I know that I want to come when I have weeks to stay. So I'm just looking for that window of opportunity, and I'm gonna come hang out with you.
Oh, we look forward to that. And yes, definitely take weeks, because it does take about a week to actually sink into the rhythm here. And that's what we find is that there's a pace of life here that allows us to really rest into our naturalness, to drop beneath a lot of the cultural rhythms that we've entrained into that actually pull us out of our most natural state of being, which is why we have chosen to really ground in here for this moment where we're setting out these pleasure ripples to the rest of the planet.
I love that. So, you all are so steeped in pleasure, and as I've mentioned, that you really are such a fantastic example of embodiment of that in every aspect of your lives. And so I'm curious, what has you in this moment, like what are you experiencing around the embodiment of pleasure for the collective, of where are we? Where's our needle kind of holding in regard to our ability to experience pleasure, and what's being called forward?
Well, that's a really great question. We're looking at each other like, which direction do we come from here? Well, I know I can start by saying the reason that we've actually even been called forth to create this offering right now is because it's being reflected back to us from every angle. Like, so many women are longing for a deeper experience of themselves, of who they really are beneath the skins of our identities, beneath the roles that we play as women. And, it's so common that as mothers and lovers and wives and, businesswomen and all that we're doing in the world that, we let our self-care slide down the list of priorities, and it can often be challenging to actually even remember how to relax because we're so used to being driven by these rhythms and by these roles. And so really this is an opportunity for us as women to remember how to tap this wellspring of pleasure that is readily available for us, that's always here. And we're basically just helping to just illuminate some pathways to return to our naturalness and to tap this and to tap the nourishment, to remember how to receive it and allow it to turn on every aspect of our life, because it really feels like we're ready. As a collective, we're ready to know what's possible when we're creating from our overflow, rather from a place of deficiency, which has been, culturally rampant. That's one piece to weave in.
And absolutely everything Amber's saying so eloquently is right on the mark as far as I'm concerned. And another aspect that I think is important sharing is just framing pleasure from the get-go. And I feel like pleasure's gotten a bad rap culturally, and that's one of the reasons why it's taken till now to really open to pleasure as a collective. And I feel like when I see how people most relate to pleasure, it's not actually pleasure at all. And a lot of people are seeking pleasure through numbing out behaviors or through entertainment or through escapism, through different mediums, or through addictions and things that, to me, those behaviors don't lead to what we're talking about when we talk about pleasure. So pleasure, as far as we approach it, is it's very broad and deep, and it has to do with showing up in full presence, full embodied presence, where you are available to completely receive whatever is true in the moment. And that includes the entire range of emotions, the entire range of sensation in the body. And so that could look like if what's true for you is to experience your grief in the moment, and I do think there's a lot of collective grief that we'd be well suited to feel at this moment on the planet with everything that's going on, that actually can be a gateway to our pleasure, because it's a gateway to what's true, what's embodied, and what's calling us into our deepest presence. And from that, it does expand the range of experiencing ecstasy and orgasmic energy and the whole shebang. But I think that's a really important piece, is that one of the reasons why I see the collective and women as the leaders in this really ready to experience embodied pleasure is because we're ready for what's real. And we're ready to feel everything, all of it. And to me, pleasure is the life-giving source and the life-activating place within us that can open us to the full expanse of our feelings and expression as women.
Yes. Thank you for naming that.
Yes, as you're naming that, I'm just feeling how foreign that is to the collective energy system. You know, that like pleasure is this, for most people, this compartmentalized thing that you get to when all the work is done, or, at the end of a sexual act, or, in a moment with a piece of chocolate. It's like, it feels like it's very much like a payoff, or a goal, rather than even something that people consider as a way of life or a way to, us connected with embodiment and with each moment.
Definitely.
Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of what we're, I don't want to say up against, but it's really important to be aware of and name that perspective that you're talking about, Jody, as we offer something that's paradigm shifting. I mean, this isn't just this really is a full reorientation of not just pleasure, but how we can embody experience and how we can create in the world. Because rather than pleasure being this thing that comes later, we're saying, no, it is the source. Begin with pleasure and let that inform all aspects of life, including your work in the world. So it's a completely different perspective.
Yeah, and it is completely reorienting our relationship to pleasure to being one of wholeness. So rather than seeking pleasure outside of ourselves to fill a place of emptiness inside where we don't feel fulfilled and gratified, so we're seeking all these momentary, instant gratification forms of pleasure, which, as we're saying, aren't really true pleasure. But instead, we're shifting it to use pleasure as the guide to actually bring us deeper into ourselves, to create a greater access to our essence, to the experience of our wholeness. And when we find that pleasure in all of the simple moments of our life, like even bringing it down to the most fundamental level of our breath, where you can actually learn to relate with your breath in a new way, where you can feel the pleasure of what it feels like to really allow that breath to come all the way in and allow that life to turn you on, and as we exhale, to really let ourselves consciously release the tension that we've been holding on to, and just to feel in one moment how we have the power to shift our state from the inside out. So that we're really shifting from seeking pleasure to sourcing pleasure from within, and then watching how life begins to reorganize itself around us to match the frequency that we're embodying, that frequency of pleasure that we're claiming here from the inside out.
And that's natural.
Mm-hmm.
And that just because it's normal, let's say, to put pleasure in these moments or to create goals around pleasure, that might be what's most normal at this point. It's not what's most natural. And so as we begin to strip these layers away, we're becoming more like nature again and more how the natural ecosystems operate. And I feel like that's really what we're getting into with all of this. And so what's great is once we start stripping away the layers and returning to this more natural state of pleasure, it gets easier and easier.
I actually love that. It's a tweetable, right? Shifting from seeking pleasure to sourcing it from within. Not using pleasure to be some outside thing that you're trying to fill a gap with, but really using it as an infinite wellspring. This is perfect timing for me because I've really been in this space the beginning of this year trying to figure out, like, what is my point for this year? Usually I love the beginning of the year and I'm really into, claiming a word for the year and an essence, and I've been talking about that on the show these last couple of weeks, that I'm still very much in this space of like not wanting to commit and just being in this different space of sort of drifting, which is highly unusual for me. And as you're speaking, I'm just getting really clear that this is definitely a piece of, maybe the whole piece of what I'm up to this year, but it's around exploring. I just had a cool energy session last week, and it was about reclaiming this innocent and pure part of myself where, in that space as a little girl, like, the blueness of the sky could be a portal to something completely different, to like a whole new universe, and just being like enamored in the moment. And I can feel the energetic as you both are speaking that's sort of awakening in my cells where, there's this breathless, it is like, it's sort of like the edge of orgasmic, but it's like, my heart wants to open to that. And I can also feel the conditioning in front of that. That's like, oh, that would be too much pleasure, or that would be too indulgent, or, whatever that is. So I'm just having that experience of both of those in my body as you're speaking, like intense curiosity and delight, and then also like, ooh, that's a little much. It's sort of scary,
Yeah, well, that's really beautiful for you to speak to that, because it's really, what you're speaking to there is actually, well, there's a few things, but, we've been in this discussion about expanding our pleasure threshold. It's like our nervous systems have these thresholds for how much pleasure can we actually experience and allow ourselves to experience, because it's a current that's running, and so we learn how to open into that. So, part of this offering is that, to learn how to actually expand our pleasure threshold to allow that current to flow through us more freely, and within that, also exploring these new dynamics that I'm also hearing in what you're speaking to there, where new ways of creating, where we're actually aligning with the design of life in a deeper way, where we learn how to really rest into our magnetism. So that place where we're not actually supposed to be in the doing, the place where we're needing to actually go in and rest in and drink in the nourishment and really let ourselves saturate in our gift until that moment where we get filled up from the inside out. And from that place, there's a moment where then inspiration bubbles up and arises through us and compels us into action. And when we follow those natural rhythms, sometimes it defies logic. We feel like we need to be doing something, or we need to be productive, or, show that we're actually, being effective in the world. But if we allow those gaps of time where we're meant to rest, when we wait for the inspiration to then compel us into action, we are much more effective, we're more efficient, we're more in that flow, more in that zone where, again, it feels like we're in the effortless effort, and we're really, truly enjoying the action that we're taking rather than from a place of needing to effort something into being. And that's a very pleasurable way to create.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's a moment-to-moment choice. What I love is with Amber and I, even in creating together over the last 6 weeks, especially intensely focused on this offering around pleasure, it's been our personal practice has been brought to the edge of, wow, we've even been in the place of coding stuff ourselves on the computer, and it's like, where's our pleasure edge with this, you know? And so I just wanted to speak into that it is a moment-to-moment practice and a choice, and a moment-to-moment choice, and it's lifelong.
Ongoing.
There's no there.
Thank you for naming that, because, you know, it is, we talk about that on the show all the time, but it's this undoneness, right? Like when we hear you speak, then we're like, oh, I wish I could get to be like them, and then it would just be easy for me. And yeah, you guys still have to, you still have to work the edge. And I was actually doing something really similar just before the show, because I have all this spaciousness, and so I was making myself kind of miserable, thinking like, well, I should probably research their bios and think about, I should be doing something. There has to be something I should be doing, and I was feeling kind of annoyed by it, you know. And so I finally went and laid on my bio mat, and I was just enjoying the heat and the crystals, and you know. And so even there, though, I was trying to like move some energy and fix some things, and you know, read the energy of what should the interview be, and it was so funny because however many times I've done that in my life, the answer always ends up being the same thing, which is just be in essence. And there's something about the learning of it every single time, of it expanding your edge. And so just before I came out of the meditation, it was like, well, I could just relax and be in the moment and not have to construct anything. And it was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I do. I love that.
That's it, yes.
That's it, again.
Yeah.
I love it. So, you know, what I would love to hear from you guys is, you know, have you always been this good at receiving pleasure, or what does that journey look like of, you know, if you're someone who really isn't great at receiving anything, which I know we've had lots of discussions with our tribe about, you know, how did you all begin to unravel that so that you could start to move more and more and more into this, you know, the beautiful lives that you live that are so filled with pleasure?
Yeah, so what comes up for me first was returning to my emotions. That feels like that for me was a gateway into my body and a gateway into receiving pleasure in the broadest sense. Growing up, I really took on a very, I'd say, unbalanced masculine stance growing up of being able to fix everything and handle everything, keep it all together. That was kind of my paradigm until I was about 18. And so my emotions, there really wasn't much room for them. And I just reached a certain point where I just knew I couldn't continue that way, and that for me to blossom into the woman I wanted to be and was meant to be, I needed to create space for myself to feel again. And so, I mean, there's a lot. This is a multi-layered question, Jody, so there's a lot that's gone into it. But for me, that was the gateway, was creating the safety within to have my tears, to feel that range of emotional expression, and then also to then reshape the community that was holding me, and to really find other people that, even though it was really uncomfortable, to find other people that I trusted could witness me in that full expression. So that was a huge part of it. And then another piece of that is, I think a lot of women can relate to this, but having grown up very much in a take care of others dynamic, it was just making I really do believe that before receiving pleasure from others, we need to create the space to start tending to our own needs and to start discovering what pleasure even feels like for ourselves, even if it's as simple as, you know, taking a bath or dancing or going out into nature by ourselves. Creating the space and making time with ourselves to explore and discover our pleasure and being present in our bodies, that is essential. So I'm going to pass it over to Amber, but that was another piece, is I do feel like for even starting before that point, I always made pleasuring my body a priority, and I didn't fully know what I was doing But looking back, I see that learning to give myself pleasure is what really opened me up to be able to receive it in the broader sense. So those are just two pieces, and this is just you asking that question. There's so much gold in it, and I'm going to be meditating on that more.
Thank you.
And there's so much of what Ariel just shared that really is echoed in my own experience. And I, just a little bit of my story. I lost my mom when I was 7. And so at 7, I instantly stepped into the role of being a mama. And so I was responsible for many of the things a mother would do just to keep a household going, and laundry and dinner and cleaning and all of that. And so I definitely took on the mantle of being incredibly capable and competent, and being, I had this need to be needed, basically, was a pattern that I developed in my life, so that every relationship, every situation that I created for myself, I set up a dynamic where my capability was reigning supreme. So I was in a position where I was indispensable, basically. And so I was really highly identified with the roles and the ways I showed up in the identities and that. And as far as pleasure and where pleasure stood in that, it was pretty much something that I related to as an event. So my experience of orgasm was from what I had seen through our cultural images. And so for me, I thought that I was actually defunct. I thought I was orgasmically defunct for a good portion of my life. And I did discover as a child how to give myself pleasure, and I was actually really good at that. But as far as experiencing it with another, it was non-existent for me until my 20s, my mid-20s, and it began to slowly open. But it was actually the birth of my first child that really opened me up to the fact that I am a profoundly ecstatic being. And so many people often think, oh, you were born this way. This is just who you are. And, although, of course, that's true on one level, I did really accumulate a lot of veneers that I had to shed. And so my experience of birth with my first son was that the current of pleasure was flowing so strongly through me that it pretty much melted all resistance. And at that point, I had already developed techniques through the experiences of meeting pain in my life, where I had discovered that I'm really good at transmuting pain and transmuting sensations so that I could become neutral within it. But the birth gave me the experience of going beyond neutrality into profound pleasure. And so because there was no resistance in my system, that current was flowing through, and it opened me to a whole other level. And what I discovered after the birth is that it actually upgraded my nervous system. So it radically expanded my pleasure threshold. And after that, I began to discover that pleasure was so available to me in every simple moment of life. So from that point, I could be going on a walk, and the wind could shift in a certain direction, and just that shifting of the wind on my body would just fill me with great delight and pleasure, or feeling the feeling of the breath entering me, or pausing to smell a flower and really becoming so present with the flower that I could inhale the essence and the aroma and let it saturate my senses rather than just a passing sniff. And so I began to discover, it's like, wow, there is so much pleasure here available for us when we just slow down, become really present inside of our skin, and become available to receive it. And so from that experience, that the inner guidance activated, and it began to open me up and to show me that, orgasm is not an event. Like ecstasy is actually, it's a state of being that we can open to. And Ariel touched it, that it's the willingness to feel everything deeply. So it's not just the bliss, the joy, what we think of generally as pleasure. It's the willingness to feel the full spectrum of what's alive and present in our experience, and to open to it completely without resistance. So to allow resistance to be there, but to not choose in accordance with resistance, to just meet it, to bring our breath to it, to soften into it, and to discover what more can we feel, how much more available can we become to what's here. And in my experience of becoming a mother, it was the claiming of pleasure, again what Ariel named, the claiming of taking the time to pause from my identities, to pause from all my responsibilities and the roles that I play as a woman, and to carve out that time for me to drop into myself, the unstructured time to be present, to develop a deep intimacy with myself, which I immediately then began to see reflected in all my relationships. So that direct reflection of being willing to be intimate with ourselves immediately plays out in how intimate we can be with others. And And it's an essential component that really allows us to access and embody this pleasure so that we can truly share it from a place that's really real.
Yeah. I want to circle back around to the relationship piece, and something just unfolded as you were both speaking, this awareness of many people who listen to the show are highly sensitive, right? And so have had, life experiences where life felt really intense and scary, and because we could hear each other's or hear other people's thoughts or feel the anger and projections and emotions of people around us who weren't very awake, we turned that ability, that really special opportunity to feel and to know and to be so tuned in, and we covered it up in order to feel safe and to sort of reduce the sensory input because there wasn't any training about what to do with it. And just as you're speaking, it's like I know you guys already know this, but I'm really just feeling it in my own system, and for the women who are going to listen to this, that this actually feels like it feels like a realization of the point, that as we reopen these abilities to be highly sensitive, that, because I think for many of us, we're sort of in this middle ground, like, okay, I used to be that way, and then I went really asleep, and now I'm waking up, but, like, I'm allergic to everything, and, I still have to not be in loud places, or I can't have, strong smells, or, all of those kinds of reactions that are sort of running through this higher consciousness community right now. And I feel like there's this sort of purgatory between waking up to what all of that is and then moving into what if we open to all of that? What if we use these, super sensitive abilities to actually experience the world in a completely different way, in this deeper, more pleasurable way. And because I know so many women like me that are highly sensitive sort of feel like they suffer through this humanity piece, not knowing how to be both and, how to open to all of that stimulation and also, enjoy it, like have it be pleasurable.
Yeah. And Jody, there's so much in what you're sharing, but one of the pieces Amber was sharing earlier about pleasure being this flowing current, that it's not even something we're doing. It's more a matter of opening to this flowing current that's always there. And I think that is an important aspect, because if we're only partially opening, then in a way it can feel dangerous to be sensitive, because it might feel like things are getting lodged in us. Versus opening to this flowing current, then we can experience the full range and have it be safe, because it is momentary. It's not going to last forever, and there is this flowing river that can wash all the way through us, the full range. And there's one other piece that you were sharing. I just wanted to toss this in there because it just feels so relevant. As you were speaking to how many of us have been conditioned to hide the gift of our sensitivity, or to hide our capacity from ourselves and from the world, to hide our capacity of experiencing pleasure. And so earlier we were speaking about the difference between seeking pleasure outside versus sourcing it within. And the complement to that is most people are hiding our ability to be sensitive, hiding our ability to experience pleasure. And what we're talking about is creating the space to source. So this came to me a little while ago of the paradigm that is normal is to be in this game of hide and seek. Like we're hiding from the pleasure, and we're hiding from really finding that ability within, and then we're seeking these momentary pleasure gratifications outside. And what we're talking about is creating the space to source. So to me, that's the helpful little thing of, okay, it's not simply a matter of sourcing within, even though it is within us. In order to source within, we have to create space around that spaciousness. And if we're bombarded with other people's psychic energies or emotional currents, there's not always a space for that. So whatever that looks like, we need to be compassionate with ourselves and create the optimal conditions to source.
Absolutely, and just adding on to that is, part of what we're sharing, through what both of us have developed through our experience, which is, for both of us, it's not been through, really other teachers that have taught us this. This has been an internally emergent experience that's been guiding us and unfolding through us. So what we're offering here is, again, it's been deeply sourced from our personal embodiment. And in my journey of discovery, it was about 15 years ago or so that I was in that place of super sensitive. There was my list of foods that I couldn't eat was, pages long. I was highly sensitive to most foods, electromagnetics, and so I kept myself pretty isolated and in, tropical places where, I was basically, not in those environments. And I had very strong stories around them and beliefs around how they affected me, these things. And at that time, I met somebody significant in my life who began to open me up and began to show me right away. He's like, you need to learn how to transmute. And I was like, okay, yeah, I want to learn that. And so it began a process. It wasn't overnight, but basically began to show me that I have much more command than I realized, and that I was really believing the stories of my oversensitivity, and so then continuing to create that experience. And so what I discovered, through opening into radical vulnerability, because it was really that place where you have to open so completely, because it's like water going through a hose. If there's any kinks in the hose, it's going to ram up against that point and create pain. It's an obstruction. So if we can actually create these containers that are safe for us at first, to learn how to open into radical vulnerability, to allow everything in, all the way in, like actually suck it in, drink it in, like invite it to the core of your being, we can discover this place where we actually learn how to transmute those distortions, to transmute the incoherencies and all of these things that are present in our environment that, that don't support life to thrive. Yet we can actually be like living vacuum cleaners that suck them up and send them back out in a transformed version that actually uplifts the field. So, at this point, it's instilled within my makeup, within my energetic wiring, that this is happening without a thought given towards it. But it took some time of cultivating that and laying the pathways so that would become automatic. So, I've guided many people through this experience now, and with, highly effective results. And this is part of what we're going to be sharing is, how do we interact in this world with all of these dynamic elements present, and all these roles that we play, and be able to use them as fuel for our growth, and to use them to actually discover more of what we're capable of than we could have ever imagined.
Amen. Everything in me is on the edge of my seat. I'm so excited. You and I have been talking about doing some individual work together, and I can just feel the, yes in my system. Like, that's what's next for me, for sure. And what, Ariel, you were just saying about giving yourself spaciousness, I think that's the perfect circling back to this relationship piece, because I know that as you've been posting about this offering and stuff, there were some men that were like, okay, you girls go do it by yourself, or like there's that backlash between the masculine, and I think there's the question mark in the feminine too, which is like, is it okay to pleasure ourselves? How do we do that? How much space do we, is permissible for us to be figuring that out? And then, when we do that, how does that inspire our men or our partners to show up, more in service of our pleasure rather than feeling excluded from it? So can you speak to that some more?
For sure. Well, first of all, I want to say you can love yourself, but you can't love yourself too much. And it's really absurd, and I feel like the backlash you're speaking to is coming from that place. And I just want to say it like that, to name the absurdity of, it's okay to love yourself, but you don't want to love yourself too much. And what is that? Like, I just want to name it like that, so we can kind of shine a light on how absurd that is. And so I feel, first of all, it's impossible to love ourselves too much. And if we have women fully lit up with pleasure who know how to pleasure themselves, they are going to naturally start sharing that gift from the overflow, and that is only good news for the men in their life, only good news for their children, only good news for their coworkers and everyone else. So for me, I have compassion for the perspective that would have fear around women claiming their pleasure, but it's just, to me, it's just so, I just want to debunk that clearly, and that's one of the reasons we're offering this. And just, it's one of those, you have to experience it to know it. But time and time again, when a woman learns how to pleasure herself, she's no longer in fear of her pleasure, and she's now has the ability to share that gift with others, and is now holding that as is really the fire tender of that pleasure current for herself, for her community, for her family, and doesn't only give that to herself, but encourages others to give that to themselves, and it becomes, in a way, sacred activism. She's a stand for that current to be moving through the entire tribe. So it's interesting that in focusing on pleasuring ourselves, that is actually what can unleash it at a greater level beyond us. So that's one piece I would share to that, and I know Amber has more.
Yeah. That's so fundamental. When we really claim it here, it's not selfish at all. We become those walking permission slips. And it's my experience that when a woman is turned on, claiming her pleasure in her body, that she automatically calls those into her field into their power. And certainly with men, the beautiful men that are in our lives, like, they're incredible men. And they feel so deeply honored by us because we know how to honor ourselves. When we do so, then we're more easily in the position to actually honor others. And then likewise, when we are taking total responsibility for our succulence, for our pleasure, where we don't actually need anyone else to give that to us in order to feel it, and we're coming from our overflow, from that place, then it's like we are magnetic, we are radiant, we are inspiring, we uplift all those that we come into contact with, and there's no space for resentment, because if our needs aren't getting fulfilled from somebody else, there's a tendency to build resentment, or there's irritation, or there's things like, oh, we're not getting what we need, and so those other tendencies result. But instead, it's again, we become this field of coherence that naturally invites others in. It's such an invitational field, an inclusive field. It's not like, okay, I've got this, you go ahead and go away, I've got this. Like, I don't need you. It's like, ooh, I'm going to fill my cup so that I can keep overflowing with you, with all who are around me.
It actually changes the math. We step into an entirely different dimension of geometry and math and everything, rather than two halves coming together, or rather than, there's you and me, and together there's two of us. It's like, no, there is one whole sovereign being that's fully sourcing from within and connected to that current of pleasure that she knows how to connect to for herself. And then let's say we're also inviting that and inspiring that in the men in our lives. So now we have one whole sovereign being coming together with another whole sovereign being, and that actually is from that place that it creates a third dimension of relationship and a third dimension of, let's say, sacred union or lovemaking. So now it's 1 + 1 actually equals 3. There gets to be 3 forces, because it takes us coming together in that sovereign wholeness to open to the realm of alchemy in our relationships. And that's what I'm up for. I mean, I want to be making magic in my relationships. I want alchemy. I want deliciousness. And that's just not going to happen if we're in the I'm less than and I need you to fill me up. The alchemy only happens from the overflow.
Yes. Yes, I totally feel that. And it's so funny because the ego wants to find some way to fit it into the old paradigm. Like, well, how would that work if there's limitation, or there's me or you, or, something like relationships. We're so conditioned that our relationships are some way to fill ourselves. And so, from that space, like, the men get intimidated, or we feel like, we won't need them anymore, or, like all of that old stuff, which is just being invited to burn away and allow us to really show up in this. It's exciting to imagine men also showing up in their wholeness and, the alchemy of, when you said 1 + 1 makes 3, I kind of was feeling like 1 + 1 makes all, because it's like you're really in this, like, unity space of, of everything, right?
Yeah. Yes, I love that. Something Amber and I have been talking about too, because for us also, that you're calling it the old stuff comes up, and it's helped me a lot to, rather than getting intimidated as that stuff comes up, to shift how I'm looking at it, and it's so cute. And that doesn't help everyone, but it helps me. So rather than the ego and it's trying to take me down, it's like, oh look, it's just holding on. Like that's actually because at a certain point we know that there's these fundamental universal ways that nature operates, and nature does operate from a place of overflow and affluence if we don't mess with it. And so if that's what's true, then when my patterns of resistance and fear are coming up that are contrary to that, it's not, I don't need to give it more power by thinking it's this big thing. I can start to, and I don't always have this, Jody, but I've been really practicing of just like, look at you, like almost treating it like a little creature, like this little creature that's throwing a tantrum, and it can be pretty cute. You know, it's not true, but it is cute, and then that helps me. It brings the levity and the humor in. Like, and Amber and I, we haven't even spoken about that. We are very weird and goofy and ridiculous, and that is a huge part of opening to pleasure. Is just being able, to me, humor and laughter and being able to laugh at ourselves and see the cuteness of when our ego mechanism is doing its dance and doing its thing. The laughter and humor, that's like bringing out the rattle in shamanic practice. And oftentimes we get a little drum heavy. We're like doom, 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 like doing our deep work, and it's very deep. And yes, it is deep, but we got to be able to laugh, and that's bringing in the rattle and shaking up the energy and shifting our state quite immediately and easily.
Yes. Yes. And that's a product of our innocence too. You know, the place where it's like, again, that in our naturalness that we can be unfiltered. It's like, oh, in this moment, how the current is flowing through me is absolutely ridiculous. I can't stop laughing, and nothing really makes sense, but it feels so good. You know, and that we can, those places where we hold ourselves together or we want to appear a certain way, that those are the places that we get to start relaxing, to just feel like what's here in my innocent self that, you know, doesn't have everything figured out, you know, and that is so curious about everything and just wanting to discover what more is possible here.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Love all of that. So we're nearing the end of our time together, which I cannot even believe. This is flying. And I feel like I'd love to just invite, if there's like a pleasure secret that you can share, or that you've learned, or something that would surprise people, or I don't know. I'm just going to open it like that. I feel like you might know what it is.
I think we each have something.
Okay, you go first.
So mine's really simple, and I think it will surprise people, and that is that one of the most effective and simple ways to start learning how to increase your sensation threshold and therefore your pleasure threshold is learning to work with the sensation of cold. And so most people do not relish the idea of a cold shower. And actually you can even see when it comes to cold water, our general tendency is to want to resist that sensation. And so an invitation I have is to work with that, and it could be a really simple way is with a cold shower, is to play with imagining that cold water is pleasurable and even engaging with pleasurable sounds. And so in a way you're kind of tricking yourself at the beginning of rather than tensing your body up and saying and resisting the cold, is to enter into that and to breathe deep, and for the practice to be present in your body and even make pleasurable sounds. And sound is really an essential piece here, and to just and just imagine that it feels good, and to make pleasure sounds in the cold water. and then just notice how you feel after that experience, and how a simple thing like moving into what seems like it would be uncomfortable and not pleasurable, there's actually an ability to access pleasure within that. So that would be a practice I would offer you, is explore a new relationship with cold water.
I love that. That's a good edge for me to start playing with, because I hate cold water. We have a gorgeous pool, and I usually only swim in it 3 or 4 times a year, because it's always cold because it's not heated, and we live in Ohio. And I've tried that, okay, I'm just going to plunge in this time, but then I always get pissed off because it's cold and it makes my adrenaline happen, and I'm like, meh. So I love the idea of embracing it as an opening and using sound to transmute it. That's a fun place to play.
Yes, the sound is key.
Yeah, that's actually one of the places where I began to first develop, too, my capacity to be with sensation. I would go to these hot springs where they have a really hot and a really cold, and I go back and forth between the two to find that place where, okay, instead of contracting in the cold, which is our tendency, can I actually just imagine I'm melting from the inside out, and just how much more can I relax in this? And I got really, really still, and I could come to the place where I couldn't actually even tell if it was hot or cold anymore. I was just tingly, just alive.
I love that. Thank you.
That's a beautiful practice. And to add upon that, another really simple one is I'd recommend going outside, so going out into nature, and whether that's just in your front yard or actually out in the forest, whatever it may be, what you've got available to you, and just put your bare feet upon the earth if possible, if it's not snowing, and then begin to breathe, but not just a normal breath as you imagine it coming in through the nasal passages of the mouth, but actually imagine as you're inhaling that you're breathing in through every pore, and you're drinking up through the soles of your feet, and drinking in through the palms of your hand, and drinking up through your perineum, in your womb. And so you're inhaling and really receiving that current of nature, receiving that life force, and let it fill you up all the way. And then as you exhale, letting some pleasurable sounds also escape, but as you exhale, just imagine you're exuding your unique essence as a gift to nature, so that you can actually start to explore this exchange of life that we're always in, this dance of life where you're inhaling, receiving, and then exhale, offering the gift of your essence. And you can imagine the trees and the plants breathing it in, and it's how beautiful is it that nature has a design that what we inhale is what the plants exhale, what they need to thrive, and likewise, what we exhale is what the plants need to inhale to thrive. So just to start to connect with that sensation, that feeling of breathing with nature in that way.
I love that. We've actually been having this conversation about energetic exchange in the ways that, our essence exchanges with life. And that is such a beautiful, gorgeous example of, because what we've been talking about is it's not just about money as an exchange. That's one grain of sand on the beach of all of the ways you could exchange with life, right? And so your money situation is just a reflection of how you exchange. And that couldn't be a more perfect example of literally exchanging your essence with the fundamental building blocks of life. And you can imagine, as you increase your capacity to do that, how that flows into all of the other ways you're exchanging with life in your relationships and with your children and, with your purpose and with your money and all of that. And so it's such a fundamental exercise for how you can really be in essence, and it will do a bunch of things, but the things are not really what it's about. It's this ecstatic feeling of beingness.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh my goddess, I am having so much fun. I hate to even consider ending, and so we may have to play again with you soon. But in the meantime, I know that we can play with you actually and just, this will air on Wednesday, so tomorrow we can play with you. So let's talk about that before we sign off. If people want to play more in pleasure with the two of you, how can they do that?
Yes, well, tomorrow we are very excited to be offering a free call called Essential Pleasure, How to Build Your Pleasure Muscles and Turn on Your Life. And we'll be getting way deeper into all of this and also including experiential elements. So right in the moment on the call, we can be guiding women to be tapping into more of what we've been talking about today. And this call is our kickoff for a 4-week course that we'll be offering beginning in February. So this is just the gateway into sourcing and creating space for our essential pleasure. And so we would love to invite you to join us on the call tomorrow to go deeper into it.
Yes.
Beautiful. So where do they find the sign up for that call, Ariel?
They find it, well, is it possible to include a link, Jody, for them to?
We will. We will definitely include, we'll put the link all the places. So we'll send it in the email. We'll put it on the chat. So if you go to www.wsmrchat.com, we will post the link over there as well. And, so you'll be able to find it either of those ways. We'll also post it in the tribe. So if you're not yet part of the tribe, we'll post it in there as well, which is facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe.com.
Beautiful, yes.
Yeah, so we'll post it in there so everybody has access to it.
Yeah, so just click on the link and we'll see you on the call.
Yes. And I mean, you can definitely tell from just listening to this little bit of conversation that these ladies really are doing something so unique on the planet. It is deeply sourced from, this experience that they've been engaged in their lives. And every time I speak to them or hang out with them, I'm amazed at just the depth and breadth of newness of what they bring to the table. So if you can join us for free on Thursday, absolutely do that. That's a no-brainer. And I'm doing the 4-week course too. I can't wait.
Yay, so glad you're joining us.
Yay!
Come on.
Yeah.
Exactly. Jody, I have a poem I'm inspired to offer, a poem that was actually born out of this space of self-cultivation.
Oh, please, yes.
It's called Reformed by Rapture. The flow of love rushes and gushes through, a passionate torrent reorganizing the landscape of neurology. Pleasurable sensation spills the banks, flooding trodden paths of ingrained response, displacing dilapidated beliefs, clearing hazardous overgrowth. Ecstasy makes way for coherent architecture, repatterning in the likeness of love, laying tracks and building bridges of beauty, generating forms that support life unfurling its natural splendor, restoring truth as informer, regenerating generations of distortion, ancient lineages ameliorated, reconciled in wholeness, soul splayed open in devotional surrender. The inherent divine blueprint reveals its brilliance. Past imprints pale as rapture reigns supreme.
So good. So good. Thank you for sharing that. Gorgeous. Yes, actually, if we can post that in the tribe, I know that people will love to see it. So if you want to send it to me, I'll post it tomorrow after the show airs.
Beautiful, will do. Thank you again for this invitation to meet you in essence and to share this invitation with all of our sisters. And we welcome you into this field that we've created so that you can really feel what it is to be a welcomed woman.
There's nothing better than welcoming ourselves all the way home.
All the way home. And so it is. Okay, sisters, until next time, with pleasure and delight. Bye for now.
So much love.
Bye.
We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination, for God's sake. A revelation, for God's sake. An inspiration, for God's sake. Illumination. gotta say.